I'm Melody Priest, 51 years old. Today's date is June the 25th, 2005. Location is Kanawha County, Charleston, West Virginia. And I am the wife to Karl Priest.
I'm Karl Priest, age 56, June 25th, 2005, Charleston, West Virginia, in Kanawha County. And I'm the husband of the interviewer.
Karl, can you tell me where you first grew up?
Well, I grew up in the Charleston, West Virginia area. Started out in Charleston, and the unique, downtown Charleston. The unique thing about it is that I was born in the Union Mission. My parents were both residents there. They came to Charleston with personal troubles in their lives and got straightened out through the Union Mission. Withrow, it was a famous evangelist that started it, and that's where I was born. Then we moved to South Park, which is in an area of Charleston called Kanawha City. There, my dad was the caretaker of the Union Mission summer camp for their orphans, and at a certain point, the administration changed at the mission, and we had to leave, and we went to public housing. We ended up at Orchard Manor, a renowned housing project, sometimes called the South Bronx of West Virginia, on the west side of Charleston, right before you get to North Charleston, and that's where I spent the 10 years until I went off on my own.
And what were your parents' names?
My mother's name is Ruby Jane Justice, and my father was Howard Mason Priest.
You told us a little bit about your parents. What were they like?
Both of them were limited in education. My father had an 8th grade education, which was good for his time in history. My mother had a 6th grade education, but both of them were honest to a T, hardworking, good to their neighbors, just wonderful people.
Let's go back to you. In your childhood, did you ever get into trouble, and what was the worst thing that ever happened to you?
Growing up in a housing project, I was surrounded with a lot of broken homes. I was unique in that I had a 2-parent family, and one of the parents was not an alcoholic. Most of them were single parents, or if they had 2 parents, usually the father was an alcoholic, sometimes both of them. There was lots of trouble in the neighborhood, and although I wasn't in the worst of it, I did have trouble, sometimes with the police, and fortunately, by the grace of God, it didn't lead to prison. The worst that I had was an assault charge and 6 months sentence to the county jail, which was suspended with probation.
What was your best memory in your childhood?
Well, my best memory was I had a lot of brothers and sisters. Although I was an only child, there were so many children in the project that I never felt like an only child, and I really didn't know I was poor until I got into my late teens. I just enjoyed being a boy's boy and doing things that boys do. One good thing about the location of Orchard Manor was it was on the edge of a wooded area, so not only did I have the negative aspects of the sort of inner city housing project, but I spent a lot of time in the woods and down at the creek and enjoyed some of those sort of rural activities also.
What did you look like as a child?
I was tow-headed, skinny. I started wearing glasses when I was in the 3rd grade, so I always had glasses. They were usually broken and taped.
Who was your best friend back then?
I had 5 good friends that I can remember, 2 older. One was Gary. There's 2 Garys. The first Gary, the older one, had a terrible home life, but he overcame it, became a veterinarian, and retired at an early age of a very successful practice. The other one was a fellow named Gene. His father was an alcoholic, but Gene worked Well, actually, Gene was very intelligent. Should have graduated from college, but he didn't. But he worked at a local food store, Kroger's, and recently retired from there. Long-term marriage, very successful life. The other three were younger than me. There was a third, Gary. He died of alcoholism in his 40s. There was Ricky Thornton that I'm still friends with. He has an amputated leg. He had a lot of trouble with the circumstances of the neighborhood and the family circumstances, but he married and has stayed married and has stayed out of trouble as an adult. The third one was Jimmy. He was the best man at my wedding. He became mentally ill and recently died of undisclosed causes in his 40s.
Let's talk about school. Did you enjoy school?
No, I didn't like school. I just tolerated school and had my mind on playing baseball as soon as spring got there.
What kind of a student were you?
I'd say I was an underachiever. C's were satisfactory. I remember I was in a homeroom in junior high school, and the teacher was out of the room, and one of the kids got into the records and were looking through them, and they discovered that I had the highest IQ in the room, and they pointed that out to me, and no one believed it, but I guess the future after junior high school or after high school was over bore out that I had fairly good intelligence.
What's your best memories of grade school, high school, college, and graduate school?
The best memories of grade school was riding bicycles to school with my friends. Of course, we weren't allowed to do that, but we did that, and it was just enjoyable. The high school, the best thing I can remember is making the cut on the baseball team, seeing my name posted on the locker room door as a sophomore. There were only 4 of us that made the team that year.
What about college?
A lot of good memories in college. Of course, I was out of the service then, and I was a new Christian, and played college baseball one year. I met my wife while I was in college, and I was really involved with a group called Campus Crusade for Christ there.
What's your worst memories? Does anything really stand out when you think back over your school years?
First thing that comes to mind was in the 6th grade, and I was working a math problem, and I know I wasn't the best behaved student in the class, but at that time I was not disrupting anything. I was actually trying to do the problem, and the teacher, a lady teacher, came up to me and without a word raised my chin with her hand and smacked me in the face and told me I was doing the problem wrong.
Let's move on to love and relationships. Do you have a love in your life?
The love of my life is my wife. We've been married. This will be our 33rd year.
When did you first fall in love?
Fell in love with her the first time I saw her, and we just met at a church activity that day, and then we didn't see each other for a year.
Can you tell me about your first kiss?
First kiss with her was the next time we met was also sort of random, I guess is the best word for it. I had went to a revival meeting a friend had invited me to, and she was also there, and her and another friend invited me to have pizza. We went to the pizza place. It was too crowded, so we went to her friend's house, and we just we talked there. I think we might have took a pizza with us. I'm not sure. And as I was leaving, my wife told me, my future wife told me goodbye and gave me just a friendly kiss.
And how did you propose?
Well, proposed to her on the bleachers at the West Virginia State College baseball field. I was very much involved in baseball, and it was just a quiet place down there, and we just sat down there and were talking, and I proposed to her there.
And what was the best time that you can think of when you're thinking of marriage, and what was the most difficult time?
For marriage, the positive thoughts are that far outweigh the negative ones. I guess the most difficult was seeing my wife when she was ill. At one point, a surgery had went wrong, and she was seriously ill. I guess I didn't realize at the time how close she came to having a fatal accident during that surgery. And after I realized it, that gave me a lot of negative and thoughts and causes for concern. Positive things, it's just it's good to have a soulmate, someone that is also a Christian, and I probably could go on and on with good memories. It's just good to be married to my wife.
Did you ever think about getting divorced?
That thought's never crossed my mind.
What advice might you have for young couples today?
My advice for young couples would be to get yourself in right relationship with God, and then base your marriage on scriptural principles, and put family before work and hobbies.
Let's talk a little about raising kids. When you first found out that you were going to be a parent, how'd that make you feel?
Well, it was a wonderful feeling. I don't remember when my wife told me that she was pregnant with our first child. I do have a vivid memory of the second child, but I have a vivid memory of seeing our firstborn child, our son. At that time, the father had to spend time in the waiting room. It's been shown on cartoons a lot. Well, that was pretty much the way it was with me. I spent the whole night in the waiting room while my wife was in labor. And when she brought him out at approximately 8:30 the next morning, it was a little Filipino nurse, and she showed me my son, and it was just a wonderful feeling. It's indescribable.
And how has being a parent changed your life?
Well, being a parent totally will change your life if you do it right, because not only does it restrict your social life, it limits finances, it limits vacation opportunities. There's lots of things it does to change your life, but I don't want to leave the impression that it's not worth it. It is well worth it to be a parent.
Let's go on to religion. You spoke a lot about God, so obviously you believe in God.
Yes.
And what is your religion?
The best way to describe my religion is a relationship with Jesus Christ as a born-again Christian.
So you believe in life after death?
Absolutely.
And do you think that you'll go to heaven?
Yes, that's the promise of the Scripture.
You said, we're talking about serious illnesses. Are you ever afraid of dying?
I've never really been concerned about dying. I don't think anybody in their right mind would relish death, but it's something that, as a young man, that I knew was inevitable, and as an old man, it hasn't changed.
If you were to give advice to the children to come in our family, what would it be?
Well, I'd sort of have to repeat something I said as far as a marriage relationship, and that is make sure that you're in right relationship with God, and then take care of your family, and put things like that far ahead of profession and hobbies and other activities.
So what you've learned from life, what's the most important thing?
The most important thing that I've learned from life is to do the best that I can for everyone as often as I can, and especially to share the love of Christ with them.
And how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as a person that was, although he wasn't perfect, did the best that he could to do what was right and scripturally correct.
Let's go on and look at your family heritage. What's your ethnic background?
The family on my side is English-Irish.
What about your dad's side?
Well, that's my side, dad's side.
From your mother's side.
Mother's side was probably the same. I'm familiar with my side due to a lot of genealogical work.
So you've delved into that a lot?
Yes, I have. But my ancestors on the priest side were in trouble in England in a rebellion and sent over here as punishment, sent to Barbados and migrated to Virginia and on into West Virginia.
Have you ever been back to places of where your family grew up?
Yes, mostly on my mother's side. My mother was 10 years younger than my father. By the way, my father's father, whom I never met, my grandfather, was a Civil War baby, and I'm sure he had some stories that he could have told had he been alive at a time that I was. My father was born late in his life. I was born late in my father's life. But I spent a lot of time at my grandmother's farm, which is where my mother was raised. That was in Kentucky, out in the country. They were part of the West Virginia mine wars. They had been in the state border of West Virginia and Kentucky, and they were in, like one of my uncles was born in a pit dug in the floor because there was so much danger in the mining community from bullets flying around that they wanted his mother, which is my grandmother, to be safe. And I remember both my parents were raised in totally self-sustaining farm situations. No electricity. The only occupation was farming. What they got for money was through selling farm products. They had no electricity, no running water. When I started going down there, they did have electricity, but no running water. And I can remember drawing water from the well for drinking and cooking and bathing in a tub on the kitchen floor.
It sounds like you had some good memories from then.
Sure did.
What traditions have been passed down through your family?
Well, the traditions passed down through my family are, once again, probably the recommendations I'd give to future generations, and that is put family first, help your neighbor, worship God, and those three things will help everything else fall into line.
You were in the military, is that correct?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I came out of high school at the beginning of the peak of the Vietnam War, 1966. Spent a couple of weeks in college and went to join the Navy. At that time, the Navy had filled their quota, and the recruiter told me to try the Naval Reserves, which had a 2-year program, which was the same as the draft. I really wasn't worried about the draft. I had always wanted to be in the Navy, so I joined the Naval Reserve, ended up in boot camp with the regular Navy, and then had a 2-year commitment, which was cut short due to the political situation at the time with President Lyndon Johnson, who decided not to seek re-election, and he wanted to tell the American people that the Vietnam War was winding down, and he was going to release several thousand military personnel, and I got out several months early due to that. But by then I was a new Christian, and I was ready to go to college, and even though I had thought I would make a career out of the military, I told them at the time if they would assign me to a ship at Vietnam, I would go ahead and not take the early out. They told me there was no guarantee, so I got out and went to college.
What's some of the strongest memories you have of the military? Were there ever a time when you were afraid?
I was assigned to the Presidential Command Ship, which at the time was one of two ships that were escape routes for the President and his cabinet in case of a nuclear attack. The Vietnam War was just a major battlefront of the what a lot of people consider the Third World War, which was the Cold War. And at that time, there was lots of concern that Russia would launch a missile attack against the United States. So the ship that I was on was one of two designated for the President. They also had other places to escape for the President, as well as Congress and other high government officials, like underground bunkers. They had an airborne command post. But probably the place that he would have went to was one of the ships. They kept one of them off the East Coast at all times. We would spend 2 weeks out there on the East Coast, off the East Coast, and then as we came in, our sister ship would pass us, and they would be the alert ship for 2 weeks. One of the most vivid memory I have is how difficult it was to be at sea. Some people spent more time at sea, but it was very tedious. Sometimes we would anchor off the coast where they had a communication station, because we were a communication ship, and we would just spend several days within sight of the coast while they shuttled officials back and forth on helicopters, and then they did their communications activities. Sometimes we would just be way out there off the coast of North Carolina, where there was a lot of high seas. Things would be flying around if we didn't tape them down. One of the first things that happened when I was on the ship at sea is they went through a drill that I didn't realize was a drill, because I was just a lowly pot scrubber at the time. It was a very realistic nuclear attack, and they made announcements on the ship, and I thought we'd really been attacked, and it went on for an hour before I realized it was a drill.
So do you think the military was a positive aspect of your life?
The military was very good for me. It showed me that I could handle anything, and also I became a Christian before I left the military.
Let's talk about what type of work you're doing now. What is it that you've just recently retired? Is that correct?
Yes.
And what did you do?
I was a teacher for 32, 33 years. 4 of those years as a principal. I didn't like administration, so I went back to teaching, and the last 9 years was on the junior high, 7th, 8th grade level. Of course, they changed that to middle school during my last 6 years.
When you thought of your life growing up, did you always want to be a teacher?
Did not cross my mind. And when I enrolled in college, it hadn't crossed my mind. I had the GI Bill. I remember speaking to the dean at West Virginia State College, and he asked me what I wanted to major in. I said, I don't know. He said, well, they could use male elementary teachers. And I said, that's fine with me. Also, about that time, they asked me to teach a 6th grade Sunday school class at church, and it just, I'll say that the Lord led me that way, because it turned out to be a special gift that I had as a teacher, to be a teacher.
When you were growing up, did you ever have anything that you wanted to be when you grew up at that point, when you were a little fella?
I always wanted to be a baseball player or an umpire if I couldn't make it as a player.
So what lessons has your life's work taught you from being a teacher and everything you've been through?
I could give a lot of answers for that. The first one that crosses my mind is that that kids are humans. They're just at a different developmental stage. They're a lot of fun, and I think I'm very thankful that I was able to be a teacher.
Well, now that you've retired, what do you plan on doing with the rest of your life?
I definitely want to continue to help kids, either as a tutor. I tentatively will probably substitute this year and see how I like that. I'm involved in a ministry called the Karl Creation Science Group, which debunks evolutionism, which I think is really a cancer on society. So we do what we can to refute evolutionism with science and Scripture. And I have a lot of hobbies. One of them is entomology and, of course, genealogy. I think that I'll be very busy as a retiree.
Talking about some of your hobbies, tell us about a few of your very unusual pets that you've had.
We of course we have the normal dog pets, but we've also had crickets, praying mantises, and hissing cockroaches. And it's been fascinating to have those insects as pets. They're very complicated, intricate, highly technically designed creatures.
At one point, how many praying mantises did you have?
Two's the most that we've had.
But then we had an egg sac that hatched out, and we had 250.
Yeah, one of the praying mantises did make a egg case deposit, which we kept, and we knew it would. Kept it in the refrigerator, and we wanted to bring it out in the springtime for a church activity that I had with the insects, so that we could give them to the kids. Of course, you can't tell just the exact time they will hatch, and naturally they came out when no one was home and got all over the place, and my wife and daughter had to catch each of them and put them in an individual tube, which we called their nursery.
And it took you, or it took us, about 2 hours a night to feed and water all of our new little additions to our family.
Yeah, each one of them had to be fed fruit fly and watered with a cotton swab dipped in water.
So is there anything overall in closing that you'd like to leave with us?
Well, I'll just talk here for a few minutes of things that come to mind as we've had this interview. My parents were people that went through the Depression, 2 world wars, the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and it'd be great if they were both living and could tell their stories. I'm a child of the 50s and the 60s. As a young man, I went through the assassination of President Kennedy in high school. I remember very, very well the day that occurred. The Cuban Missile Crisis, that's when we actually thought we would, I was in high school at that time also, we actually thought that we would be in a nuclear war. I can remember I was out playing one time while the crisis was going on, and a jet broke the sound barrier, and everybody took off running. We thought it was a bomb. That was the first time we'd had a jet in the area break the sound barrier. 1968, while I was in the service and on the ship, a lot of things happened. Assassinations of the younger Kennedy and Martin Luther King, the race riots. I remember being involved or being alive while those occurred, and the black sailors on the ship, how they reacted to what was going on. It wasn't too bad, but there was some tension at the time. I remember the freedom efforts in the South during the 60s. My parents were not prejudiced, although the housing project was segregated in the sense that the blacks lived in one area, the whites lived in the other. We intermingled all the time. There would be fights. Mostly it was whites against whites, but if it involved somebody from outside the neighborhood, I can remember times when the white and black boys would combine. But back to I remember watching the news and seeing the people hosed down in the South, and I really didn't understand why that was going on. I thought that was wrong, and I guess I went to a segregated school, elementary school. There were no black kids, but I don't remember. I didn't actually know that it occurred in junior high around 63, 62 is when I started going to school with black kids, and had a good friend. I still remember him, named Pat Patterson. The other things I remember related to those times was the beginning of the breakdown of society, the breakdown of morals, the rise of humanism in the school systems. I was also involved in the Kanawha County textbook controversy, which got national attention, and that occurred the second or third year that I was a teacher. And it was good overall because the people had the right idea as they saw society begin to crack, but unfortunately the violent element overshadowed the peaceful element, and that's all that's remembered are the bombs that went off, which I had no knowledge about before they happened. I just read about them. I was at the Kanawha County School Board meeting the night that the board members were physically attacked. As a matter of fact, I had spoken and was sitting just a few feet from the table when somebody got up and started pounding on one of the board members. Of course, that was wrong, but those are the things that destroyed what would have been a good, peaceful situation.
Thank you for your time. Is there anything else you'd like to say to us in closing?
No, thank you very much.
We were just talking about the kids. We hadn't mentioned much of our kids. We have two, a boy and a girl. Our little boy is about 6'4", Aaron, and he's 32. And well, he'll be 32. And Noel is 27. And Karl had mentioned when he found out that we were pregnant, he doesn't remember much of Aaron as far as, but he's there in the delivery room with me with Noel. They didn't allow him back then when Aaron was born, but he was with me the whole time through Noel's birth. He said that he really didn't want to come in, but now he's glad that he did. He said he wouldn't have missed it for the world, and but it was a very long, hard labor with Aaron. It was almost 32 hours of labor. With Noel, she was a breeze. It was only 15 and a half. It's probably why there's 4 years between the kids. But they have grown up now, and so far we only have a little grandpup and 2 grandkitties. But someday we might have a real grandchild.
I thought it was interesting that we saw personalities develop even at a young age. Aaron had a business instinct, and that's what he ended up being as a self-employed businessman. And Noelle, I don't know if I can say this without sounding too negatively, but she liked to tend people's business, so she's a counselor now. She's a therapist. She just loves to delve into everyone's psychic. She just loves to psychoanalyze Mom, too. And she works at the same hospital where I work. Why don't you tell them a little bit about you and your life? I'm a registered nurse, and I waited till the kids went to school, and then I went back and got my degree. And most of the kids were much younger in my nursing class, and they would come in on Monday morning, talk about how they partied all weekend. They'd say, "What did you do?" And I said, "Well, I studied. I went to the store. I cleaned the house. I did the laundry. I studied some more." And all they did was party. So, but I think I appreciated my education a lot more. And since then, I have been
I've been working at Thomas Memorial Hospital in South Charleston, West Virginia now for 18 years as a registered nurse. I work in a GI clinic, so I play in colons and stomachs all day. I love it. But other than that, ever since I was knee-high to a bullfrog, I said someday I want to be a nurse, and I always knew that. And it wasn't until after we got married and had both kids, and then I decided to go back and get my education and to get my degree.
And we sort of had an extended family. My parents were elderly and depended upon me, so Melody very graciously pitched in, and we lived in like an upstairs-downstairs apartment. My father became ill with cancer while Melody was in nursing school, and she helped care for him, gave him shots, and it was terribly difficult for everybody, but especially her going to school. And then the next year, my mother died of a massive heart attack while Melody was in school. You want to comment any on your memory of those situations?
Especially with your dad, I had to learn to give injections so I could give him his pain medicine to keep him comfortable. And at that point in my nursing career, they hadn't taught us yet how to give injections. So they gave me a special crash course in it in light of the situation, and they helped me out too. So as a result, I was able to keep him comfortable. But sometimes it's a little scary being a nurse and knowing what you do know and still dealing with your family members. I've had that to happen even with my brother, who was in a big explosion at one of the area chemical plants, and he was transferred to the West Penn Burn Trauma Center, where the nurses up there would speak to me as a nurse and not as his sister. And it was a little harder to process the information, and I would have to filter out the information I would give to the family because they didn't need to know everything that could happen and what all the potentials that I knew. I just had to give them enough that they could deal with the situation and handle it. So sometimes it's been a little difficult being a nurse.
You came from a family with 3 siblings, and you just mentioned that your brother was seriously injured. What's your thoughts and memories about that situation?
It was a very, very bad situation. We were in Mexico at the time, and we got the call that there had been a big explosion at the Rhone-Poulenc chemical plant and institute, and he was the one that was blown up. And as a result, we had to fly back from Mexico that next day, and we went directly to the hospital and stayed till 2 a.m., and then we went home, and they called us at 7 a.m. to come back, and I flew out for Pittsburgh and stayed there for 3 weeks with him. And then eventually he went on to the Cleveland Clinic, where he received a double lung transplant. And he made it almost 3 years with a transplant, and then he died this past November, which is very hard. But the family's real close, and everyone's really good to support each other. And my parents were both living, and we all live on the farm together. So we have all my brothers and my one brother and my other sister and Mom and Dad.
And this is an audio history, but I do want to point out that my wife is very beautiful. As a matter of fact, in high school, I have a picture of her when she was in high school riding on the back of a convertible as one of the beauty queens of the high school.
I think he's a little prejudiced, too.
Okay, you have like 1 minute. Any last words?
Well, we entered our married life without any air conditioning, without a TV, although they were out. But we spent the first year just getting to know each other and doing things like walking here on the Capitol grounds and the local parks. Lots that you can do for free. You don't have to have a lot of money to be happy.
And I concur with that.